Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the PBC podcast. Mark and Steve here coming at you. Looking forward to a nice, awesome episode today. We actually just, believe it or not, received a submission as we were about to sit down and record. Today that really stuck out to us among the submissions. And
like, what are we going to talk about today? And then here it comes.
Yeah, it was just a really touching story. We're going to read this submission from a listener really quick. I will take out a few details to keep things a little vague, but we'll leave most of it in. So I'll read that and then we'll jump right into today. This is from a spouse. This is what she says. 1 year ago, I found my husband they've been married for a couple of decades, has been addicted to porn our whole marriage, and he has racked up a large sum of debt in the tens of thousands of dollars that included about $500 a month for Viagra, cam girls, and gambling. He has struggled with ED, or for those who don't know, erectile dysfunction, for the last 10 years, and always gaslit me into thinking it was that, quote, I made him nervous, unquote, about performing. I begged him to tell me what was going on, but he denied it all. I have known about his porn use, but I did not know anything about porn-induced erectile dysfunction, and I had no idea he was depending on Viagra to be able to have sex with me. For a while after D-Day, he was able to perform without, but the last 6 months, we are back to erectile dysfunction. He denies using porn, but besides listening to our podcast, he has done nothing for true recovery. No program, no groups, no CSAT, or for those who haven't heard that term, a certified sex addiction therapist. That's one of my certifications. No disclosure, etc. He says he has not slipped once with porn or masturbation, but I find it hard to believe this quote-unquote white knuckling approach is that successful. He has just admitted this year to being molested by a neighbor boy at a young age, but refuses to talk to anyone other than me. His parents knew about it, but never discussed it. I believe this is why he struggles with being emotionally unavailable and has used porn to numb his pain. He has gotten emotional once with me, but mostly is closed off to emotion. I know he needs to be the one to decide to truly lean into recovery, but since you are the only, and she emphasizes the word only, people he listens to, can you do a podcast on what true recovery is? That it's not just avoiding porn. I don't want to leave him, but I'm pretty sure I'm standing in the middle of a volcano that will eventually explode again without help. Thank you for being the one guidance we have. We can't afford your group. She's referring to our Dare to Connect program due to the debt that he's racked up, but appreciate the 20 minutes a week that we have. And then she says, jokingly, I sure do miss the hour-long chats or the old podcasts, our longer podcasts we used to do. And then she says, God bless. What a great message. What a touching message. What a heartfelt message. It's really, really hard to hear that, but it's humbling, and we do appreciate that there are those out there who find the podcast helpful, and we know that our podcast is definitely unique, and that there are certain people that are only tuning in, because of our past and addiction and for other reasons. And so we thank you for your patronage. We're grateful that you're here, and we want to really try to help this couple today.
Yeah, we really related to what she was sharing.
Yeah,
Both, her husband and all he's been through, and her betrayal and confusion,
absolutely.
just her yearning for him to get help and for things to get better. We could just so relate to just pretty much everything she said. And as Steve and I were looking at that, we thought, probably be good to talk about what keeps us stuck in addiction. And on the flip side of that, how do we get out of those stuck places? What does real recovery look like? We thought it would be really good to just do a discussion about that today.
Yeah.
So
No,
as we were,
absolutely.
yeah, Stephen, as you and I were talking, the thing you listed at the top of the list, and I would have to agree with you. If we were to put the number one issue, it would have to be shame. Right? This shame. We all carry around shame, every one of us, at various levels. It comes from a whole variety of sources. But boy, when we look at addiction, we look at what originally drove us to those outlets. It is so often, in fact, virtually always attached to some form of shame that we were trying to soothe or escape or avoid or medicate or cope with. Right. And lo and behold, what shows up in this description? Sexually abused when he was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And has never processed it or talked with anybody about it or looked for help with it. And man, we cannot overstate the shame that is heaped upon that little 5-year-old. That abuse takes place. You can't imagine the gargantuan destruction that creates in that little kid, and then he carries that baggage with him for life.
Yeah.
So this shame that causes us to feel unworthy, like we don't measure up, we're not enough, I'm not okay, I'll never be one of the good ones, I'm never going to be in the privileged circle, the religious shame that comes along with it, just all the ways that we're inadequate, and that we're missing pieces and parts of ourselves, and we're never going to fit in. And man, does that drive addiction.
Absolutely. No, I really I can hear so much. I mean, I'm listening as I listen to the story that this listener wrote in. I mean, I completely relate to this guy when she says he will not talk to anybody else. Um, Gosh, was I galvanized in that position. My wife for years lovingly suggested, can we do counseling? Can you get you in a group? Can we do something? And I was so resistant, and I was the height of hypocrisy. However bad off anyone else is, I was probably worse. I mean, I was a therapist who was doing what all day long? Making a living off of telling people what?
To get
Connect with
help.
people, get help, open up, right? I mean, I'm the one teaching that. And here I am absolutely refusing. And I did it under the guise of, I'm a therapist and I've got this, And there are reasons for that. And they're not just tied to shame. We're going to get into some of those here in a few minutes, but the shame piece was definitely a piece of it. Right. It was just there was a part of me that had bought into the idea that I did not deserve healing.
Yes.
That I was a bad person, that I had hurt. I come from a very strong Judeo-Christian background. I know many of our listeners do as well. I had concluded a long time ago, I got myself into this mess. It's my job to get myself out.
That's right. Yep.
Right.
Yep. And you're coming from this place where, so people say, well, why wouldn't you get help? I mean, you were abused at age 5. And I went through, I could relate so much to what was shared about his situation. I too had tremendous abuse, well before 5, age 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the reason that we won't talk about it and won't get help is because those abusive events, that trauma shattered our sense of self, shattered our self-respect, our self-worth, our confidence. And now to risk going and actually telling someone about this horrible, shameful, despicable past of mine, it's like, okay, people don't accept me as it is. I have trouble getting people to please people and to feel affirmed and wanted and desired by people and to be considered smart and capable and competent. I can't risk blowing all that out of the water. I'm already a loser.
Yeah,
Why am I going to reveal all this? Right. So we have
absolutely.
these fragile, fragile senses of self that the part of us is just not willing to risk coming out into the open, because it means what little tiny credibility I have left among my family and friends and coworkers, et cetera, is just going to be obliterated.
Well, and that's a good point. That's a good time to. We're actually going to skip the next bullet point for just a second, because this next the one I want to mention is very close to what we're talking about here with shame. It's Mark and I were talking about this before the program, and we look back on ourselves and this context of what makes a good recovery plan and what are the obstacles. For me, and I see this with guys all the time. I know that when I got into a group for recovery, I didn't get into a group to get better. By the time I was willing to get help, it was coming from a place of trying to keep my marriage together for just a little longer. If I
Yes.
can keep this going just a little longer, because I'd already given up on the idea that I could really change. And it was such a weird place to be, because again, as a therapist, I saw people change. I was helping them do it. But I had somehow concluded in my brain that this will work for other people, but this will not work for Steve. This is just kind of my lot in life, whether it's because of this is justice because of the things I've done, or whatever the case may be, right? That different thinking areas playing a role of, and it was coupled with this idea of, to me, recovery was just an impossibility, because again, I'd seen it for everybody else, but when it came to application for me, it was a world that did not exist. And so it was kind of a shame, but almost way past shame, where I operated in a completely different paradigm, right? And even grappling with the concept that maybe I could be better, maybe I could be deserving of recovery, maybe I am not as bad as I think, right? That whether it comes to the shame piece, or whether you find yourself in maybe even that more galvanized place of just never having experienced it, one of the key ways out of this, guys, is cultivating and trying to plant just a little bit of a seed of, maybe I am not as smart as my brain thinks I am. Maybe I am more than I realize, a little bit in, it's a movie reference for those who know the movie, but maybe I am living a little bit more of the Truman Show than I realize. Maybe the paradigm that I've built up around myself, what if it's not accurate? What if I'm worth more than my addiction has taught me? What if
Yeah.
I'm worth more than my trauma has taught me?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's easy to see how we get, what do we call this? We call it terminal uniqueness.
Yes.
I'm unique in all the world, right? Uniquely bad and perverted and hopeless and what pathetic or whatever. And what happens and that terminal uniqueness, where does it come from? It comes from the abuse of the past.
Mm-hmm.
We had adults and grown-ups and others that we looked up to who crushed us. They crushed our self-esteem, they crushed our self-worth, and they convinced us that we weren't worth anything. And so that uniqueness, it carries with us. And then we go to these outlets, these addiction outlets of various shapes and sizes to cope with that crushed state, right? With how we've been just destroyed in our self-worth. We go and try to soothe it and cope and escape and avoid. And that's where we get into the place of what we call inevitability. It's inevitable that I will always return to these outlets. It's inevitable that I will never be able to break free. And the thing is, what do I base that on? What I base it on, and here's a real key for everybody listening, I base that this is inevitable, that I'll never get out, based on all of my efforts that I have tried by myself.
Yes.
And I keep failing going it alone, right? Another one, Steve, that you and I put up here was either I can handle this just fine, or God, here was mine. God and I got this. Why did I say God and I got this? Because then I don't have to tell anybody.
Sure.
It was too shameful. It was too embarrassing. It was too awkward. It was too vulnerable. So I'll just keep trying to do this on my own. And then when I keep failing on my own, I get to the place of inevitability. I'll never be able to break out of this. And you know what? That statement is absolutely true. Listen to what I just said. I will never be able to break out of this. You know what? That was completely accurate. I will never be able to break out of this
Alone.
alone. No way. what's the solution to that? You've guys, and I know, man, anybody listening who's isolated right now, what Steve and I are saying is the most terrifying, scary thing imaginable.
Truly.
Saying you've got to dip your toe, at least dare to dip your toe in the water of
Opening up.
someone, opening up to someone, getting involved with some sort of support that's not you just by yourself. And not just you and your spouse or partner either. Some outside system. Can you dare to risk it? Can you dare to put aside your trauma and your ego and the resistance and say, I've got to move at least in some small way from me to we, from I to us, or this inevitability is going to stay here.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm sitting here thinking about this listener and her husband as we're talking, and I know that many guys find themselves in that same place of, they're resistant. They're not willing to open up, but we really do beg and plead with you. If there was another way to do it, we would tell you.
We would.
There's just
we tried all of them.
We did. We literally did. We tried everything, and recovery just does not happen in a vacuum. For those who have not yet watched it, there's a really great YouTube video by a researcher and an author. His name is Johan Hari, and he does a really great TED Talk about how the opposite of addiction is connection. And we would definitely encourage those of you who are listening to give that a watch if you haven't seen it already. It's about 15 minutes long. Talks a little bit more about this topic, but it doesn't, guys. Recovery just does not happen in a vacuum. And so please, 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 we hope that you will entertain the idea and look at it, if nothing else, from a practical point of view. As my sponsor told me once, and this is kind of where this is what resonated for Steve's brain. You can keep trying to do this alone, or you can start calling me and reaching out to me and utilizing me. And if you do that, what's the worst case scenario? Is like, I think you should just try it, because at the end of the day, you can always just have your misery back.
You can always have your misery back. Yeah.
And now he hung up on me on the phone call we were on at the time for emphasis. It was kind of a mic drop, but it's true. Right.
Well, and it's the old, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. So maybe it's time to dare to try something different.
Absolutely.
Right? And again, we know how scary that is. We do.
Terrifying.
I resisted that for decades.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm going to take this to the grave. I'm going to go it alone. And that was my shame speaking. Right. Another side of this and this one was like crazy, insanely hard for me to hear. It was the whole thing when I was confronted by, I don't remember if it was a mentor or another psychologist. I was a therapist by this point, and he looked at me and he said, Mark, you're a really capable, competent, amazing guy in a lot of ways, but there's a few areas where you're really immature. You're immature. And there's a little bit of laziness. There's a lack of work ethic in certain areas. He says you're a really hard worker in all these other places, but with this thing, there's this kind of, you're kind of addicted to instant gratification. You never really learned delayed gratification, did you? And I said, no, nobody taught it to me. The only way anybody told me to cope was, right, if you touch yourself, you're going to hell, right?
Yes.
Don't do that. Or, right, it was never anybody that sat down and said, let's talk about what happens when you have urges come to you or temptations or whatever. Let's talk about how to manage that, channel it, direct it. Nobody ever did that.
Yep.
It's either no or, right. And when I tried the rigid, clamp down on myself, grip my teeth, clench my fists. And when it would finally exhaust me and I would give in to go to my outlet. So, because I felt relief in that moment to not have to keep up the fight, I just got into that place where delayed gratification for what? Why bother?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's, a lot of us, that immaturity starts way back when, where, for example, at age 5, if you were sexually abused, it's almost assured that some part of your brain was frozen in its maturing and evolving at that point.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you're not capable and competent in a whole bunch of other ways, but in that thing, you were stunted. You were stopped, right? I like the word damned, like a dam that holds back water.
Yeah.
Right? You were frozen in that area of your maturity, and you've not come out of it since. I'm a lot of these got stuck at age 13.
Yeah.
Addiction hit big time. And sometimes now I find myself going, Mark, that's how a 13-year-old would think. What are you doing?
No, it's true. It's true. And guys, going to the solution side of this, there are ways to I've actually worked with some clients over the years where this has actually been really helpful, where what do we do to help compensate for that? We start where you're at and we begin to practice delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not even start with addiction recovery. Maybe it starts with, for example, intermittent fasting. Maybe it's a diet thing. Maybe you plan skipping a meal a week, or you plan, only drinking soda on the weekends. Or, I mean, there are lots of different ways you could. I myself, and this is going to sound silly, but I myself still practice this, by the way, with myself a little bit. Sometimes when I have a really hard something to tackle with work that I just don't want to do, I will throw a reward in front of that. All right. I'm a younger guy. I'm a gamer at heart, at least part of me. I get to do some extra Xbox time this week. I'm going to play an hour of Xbox if I can get this stuff knocked out and done. Right.
Yeah.
And I will practice those little things, right? Start wherever you're at and begin to develop out that skill, because what you're trying to teach your brain is that I can be in pain and I won't explode. I won't die.
Yes.
Right. Being in pain won't kill me. Right. And that's what we're trying to learn. That's what we're trying to develop out. And then you build from there. Right. You start employing that in different ways.
And you take that same approach. If we're talking, what does real recovery look like? I take that same baby step approach and I say, you know what? I'm going to dare to go to a 12-step meeting. Maybe I'll just go to a 12-step meeting online.
Yep.
And I'll tap into the meeting through my phone and I'll just listen.
Yep.
I'm just going to listen. That's my daring move right now, is to just attend.
Go and lie if you have to. I'm not a fan. We're not a fan of being deceptive, but if that's that's what I did in my first meeting. I was Joe and I was visiting.
Yeah.
That was me. I was Joe for like the first month I attended meetings.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever gets you in the door.
You got to make the first step and get some momentum, right? This whole unwillingness to be vulnerable, right? This certain areas of immaturity and laziness and lack of willingness to do the work. You just get started.
Yep.
Right? What is the old saying? 20 seconds of insane courage can change your life.
I love that phrase.
There's a lot of truth to that, right?
There is.
And
there absolutely is.
Yeah. I love that.
So you start where you're at, guys. We're not going to, we would never sit here and just tell you, well, just be different. I mean, and we really do connect with the reality for this gentleman and for others. There are reasons why you do what you do.
Absolutely.
Right. There are reasons why you find yourself caught in the place that you are. The ED discussion is a whole other discussion. We did a podcast several weeks ago that kind of covered that and how age plays a role into that and the biology of that. I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head, but we'd encourage this listener to go back and listen to that, because we cover that more in detail and some of the possible reasons and things for that. But with regard to this change, guys, we hope that we're leaving a message for this gentleman and for anyone else listening. If Mark and I can do it, truly anybody can do this.
Without question.
You really can. We are experts in this in part because of training and because of we make it our business to be really good at what we do. But the main reason why we're experts at it, the main reason why I think we're good at what we do, not to speak for Mark, but I'll speak for myself, is because we just did it all the wrong dysfunctional ways.
Absolutely.
Honestly, we just stumbled around for years and years and years doing it all the wrong ways.
Yep.
Don't reinvent the wheel, as we say all the time, please. And we know and connect with this couple and the financial issues that they are facing, but we're reaching out. We want to extend the invite to any of you as well. If you like what you hear on this podcast, if you find it to be helpful, for the cost of a therapy session or two a month, depending on where you live, maybe even less depending on where you live, you can have access to nearly 25 hours of content a month, discounts on upcoming retreats. We'll talk more about that another time as we develop that out. Weekly support sessions with other addicts and partners that are facilitated by myself, Mark, or the female facilitator that we've hired. We run and regulate those groups. Take your recovery to the next level. Come join us at Dare to Connect. You can find more info there at daretoconnectnow.com, along with the 2-week free trial. Give it a shot. See what you think. We'd love you. If you try it, you invest in it, we're confident you'll stay. So,
yeah. So I guess our parting message is there is enormous hope in all of this.
Yes.
But there's also, it takes just a little bit of boldness. It takes a little bit of standing up for yourself as a person in addiction and saying, I am just damn tired of staying stuck here. I deserve for me to stick up for myself.
I want to keep feeling this way?
Yeah, I deserve to stand my ground finally. I deserve better than this. And damn it, I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to make a few steps in the direction of recovery. I'm going to attend a group. I'm going to find myself a therapist. I'm going to, whatever it is for you, just make the move, get the thing started, right? The first law of physics, an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Yep. Well, an addict in recovery who will take some steps to get moving on that track will tend to stay on that track. But you've got to get started. You've got to take the risk.
Last point we should probably bring up as we wrap up here is that we know that one of the things that was mentioned is that this guy does have a fair amount of sobriety now, and he's probably, and it sounds like to some degree he's kind of bought into the idea, well, I'm sober, so what's the problem? Please trust us when we tell you that the issues that drive addiction are very powerful. Addiction, as they say in 12-step, is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And there are real reasons why sane, competent, good men and women engage in really dysfunctional, destructive behavior that goes contrary to their authenticity on all sorts of levels. We think that that's awesome that you've got the sobriety that you've got, and we totally applaud you for that. Please don't make the mistake of buying into, if there's no fire here, then there must not be smoke and there must not be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
What this wife said about this being a volcano and kind of a Vesuvius or a time bomb waiting to go off is sadly probably pretty accurate. Please take the time and put in the energy, guys, not just to find the sobriety, because that at the end of the day is important and critical, and that's one of the things that we all want. But at the end of the day, guys, that's symptomology management. We're not, recovery is not about finding a better medicine to mask the cold. It's about curing the cold.
Yep.
And that's what we want to help.
And the thing is, if this guy has some solid sobriety, that's the opportune time now.
Absolutely.
To be able to walk through that door to get to the deeper issues.
Totally.
The addiction's a symptom. You've got the symptom managed, it sounds like. Now let's take that as the opportunity to do the real work, the deep work. Otherwise, this symptomology is going to keep coming back.
It will, or in a worse fashion.
Or in another form. I know the gambling was mentioned here, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So we've got to map that out. Got to figure that out. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much again for letting us to come into your home every week for 15 to 20 minutes a week. We so appreciate you. We do hope you'll join us at Dare to Connect. If you do have, and again, you can find info at daretoconnectnow.com. If you do have questions that you'd like briefly answered here on the podcast that we're always happy to address in a brief fashion, you can write us at pbsepodcast.com. There's a contact form down at the bottom. We love to get questions, feedback, thoughts, anything from you. It's always a joy to hear from our listeners. We're now in, I think Mark mentioned today, 177 countries out of the 193 on planet Earth.
That's incredible.
We're going to be coming up on 500,000 downloads next month. We just appreciate your patronage, and it's always gratifying to hear the ways in which the podcast is helping you. Your spouses, so.
Yeah.
All
right, everybody. Thanks for being here with us, and we'll catch you next time on PBSE.
Take care, everybody.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.